Janeen, I'm going to ask you, actually, I'm going to have you, if you don't mind, finishing these sentences.
Okay.
Okay, these are about your culinary adventures.
Okay.
And we're going to start off with these fun sentences that I would love to know what would you put as the ending of the sentences.
Okay. Okay.
So, here we go. The one kitchen tool I cannot live without is
My little small paring knife.
my secret guilty food pleasure is.
Guilty food pleasure? Oh, that's a hard one because I rarely feel guilty about it. But
That's the greatest answer.
dark chocolate, I guess, would be. But I don't feel guilty.
Yeah,
And it's
I
not
understand.
it's not really secret. But I could tell you what is a secret
Yes.
that is really guilty stuff because it's not healthy at all. Is an old, and I can't find them anywhere. I think they stopped making them. They're called the Heath bar. It's toffee
Okay.
covered, and I think they used to cover it with milk chocolate, but a Heath bar that is completely covered in chocolate, and it was dark, but it wasn't. It was a bittersweet, or it wasn't even bittersweet. I think when I was a kid, it was probably milk chocolate. But I like Heath bars because it's got the crunch in the middle. I make toffee bars.
You do.
And that's probably, and there's one other one. I can't just give you one. And these why I don't eat them hardly at all because they're just god awful good. There is a creme caramel. Have you ever had it?
Not sure.
Okay, it's a custard that's baked, and when first you line a charlotte mold that's sort of like this, goes like this, and goes like this. But it's sort of like this. It could be a souffle mold that's usually tin, made out of tin, with two little ears on the side and a lid. But you line the charlotte mold with caramelized sugar.
Ooh.
Okay, first, and you set it aside. And then you fill the mold, which is a tin that you're going to bake, fill the full with heavy cream, eggs, and sugar, and vanilla. And you put it inside the caramel, and you bake it. It's a big custard, but it's really rich. It has the consistency of not of a regular custard made with milk, but this is mine made with cream. That's Tilly in the background. And it's baked, so you can cut it with a spoon, but it's smooth and very rich. Now, if I only make that one, I'm going to have at least 6 people for dinner because and you can make them individual ramekins, because when you unmold, after it's baked, you unmold the charlotte mold, and it's on a big platter that has a scoop edge, so you can have all the caramel on the edge, and then you've got this beautiful oblong. It's sort of oblong, but it's kind of a beautiful shape. It goes like this with flat top, and the caramel just melts down the sides, and you can almost cut it with a knife, but you don't need a knife. And you put it on your plate, and I serve it with fresh berries on the side. But if there's any left over, I wake up about every hour or 2 hours in the middle of the night and go in and take a spoonful.
I love it.
That's my secret. That would be my secret one, I guess.
That will be the great answer to this. Yes. This question.
Because it's really decadent and it's dreadful, and nobody should know about that. They shouldn't try. But it's really addictive, And I will continue to do that until it's gone. Okay. So I try to get everybody to eat all of it.
So you don't have to. Oh my goodness. Okay, here, next one. The strangest ingredient I've ever cooked with is.
That I've cooked with?
Yes.
Not eaten. No. Okay.
The strangest ingredient I've ever cooked with is.
Yeah. I'm trying to rack my brain of something that's strange. Strangest to me. I can't think of anything that's so strange that I've ever cooked with.
Or something that is not really found everywhere or it's something, an ingredient that is rare that you have to go to certain places
Or
to
you'd have to go travel. Yeah, okay. Well, I can tell you when I was in China, I ate a raw scorpion. I ate that, but I didn't cook it. They took something out. I mean, yeah, well, we had a lot of grain alcohol before then. So that, that was on a dare. That was on a dare because I was with a group of chefs and restaurateurs. If you ever go on a trip with a group of chefs and restaurateurs, you might want to take a bottle of Pepto Bismol or something and a few Alka Seltzers because you don't know what you're going to do by the time you get all, we dared each other to do stuff. Um, but that was weird. That was in China. That was really weird. But I would never do that again. But I think I'm trying to think of something that I've unusual. Hmm. I don't know. I'm very game. I'll try almost anything, obviously. There's another one too. I've had snake bile and snake blood because this is on my trip in China too, where we went to a special restaurant that specialized in snake. So they brought the man that owned the snake, and then we went through the whole process. And then they used every single part of the snake. We had snake skin. It was like a 3 or 4 hour uh, ordeal. We had bile. It was green in little shot glasses with alcohol, obviously grain alcohol with that too. Blood, which was red, of course. And then we ate the snake skin that was delicious. They
Really?
deep fried it, yeah. We had the meat. We had a broth, and the meat actually had a chicken taste. I mean, you could say it taste, but a fishy chicken taste, like like a duck that eats that's in certain climates, certain waters. If duck are eating fish in the lake or whatever they're swimming in, they will have a fishy taste in the meat from what they're eating, right? Okay, so that makes sense. So but it was fine, but it was really interesting that we had every single piece of that snake over a course. They fed a course here, a course there. In between, we had other stuff too, but it was one of those oddball things.
What is the snake
Bile and blood taste like?
bile and blood good
Nothing,
for? What,
nothing.
it's not good for anything. And people do that in China, right?
Yeah. Well, they think it's healthy. They think it's medicinal.
But it doesn't do anything in particular to your system.
Nothing. It
Not like
didn't to
an
mine.
antioxidant or something.
Obviously, I have a cast iron stomach.
Oh my god.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when that answered the next question, the next sentence, that feel the most
But
memorable meal I've ever had.
no, that's not the
It's,
most
it's
memorable.
not the most memorable. But okay, so tell me, what is the most memorable meal you've ever had?
Let me just think. Okay, I can think of this. This was in France. I was at a wedding,
Okay.
and the caterer. We were in La Boule, which is a small town on the coast in Brittany. But the wedding was catered by a caterer from Paris. Okay, and traditionally, this family had the wedding was in the church, of course, in the church, and then they would have a reception in the town center of town for everyone in town would come to the reception in the middle in like a main square, like a big park in the middle of right now you walked from the church to the park, and they had champagne there, and I don't know what else they had to drink, and some hors d'oeuvres, and then everyone moved to by buses. They bussed us out to where the family home was, and there they had a huge, ginormous tent with a sit-down dinner, um, maybe 8 or 9 courses. Very formal. It was a whole afternoon, and the service was done white glove service, silver trays, I think the most memorable part of that, and then this incredible over the moon, just fabulous wines were served with every course. But the foie gras was in huge. The platter came out, this huge platter for every table, and they sliced this off with this incredible aspect, and they put it on your plate. This a large portion, which is large, quite large for I think for French. For the French, they don't usually serve such hot, large portion, but it was a huge piece of foie gras that absolutely melted in my mouth. I can still taste it. And they served yachem with it. It was unbelievable. And it went on. We had the soup, we had the foie gras, and then we had, I,
Cheese plate.
oh yeah, with that was after the main course. I don't recall, quite frankly. I think maybe it was pigeon or something like that for meat, but everything was impeccable.
Yes.
Everything was just unbelievable.
I believe you. I believe you. So good.
It was all,
And
it
yes,
was all silver. It was all, and of course, I'm American, don't speak French, and the table that I was sitting at there were a couple of other Americans, but they were all French young couples of French young couples. And I was very flattered to be able to sit with that table. And I was so glad they put me with a bunch of the groom's friends. We were a little loud at our table by the end of the meal, but we were having a wonderful time.
I'm sure. I'm sure. That's exactly how it is in France. It takes the meals, they treat meals very carefully and with such
Care and precision.
care.
And then later, afterwards, but the food went on. Afterwards, we all left. We all went home, took a nap,
Mhm.
got dressed in black tie, formal wear, came back at 9 o'clock, and they had all these tangines, all these Moroccan foods, the same caterer, but a different staff. Well, it was all done kind of buffet style where you had all these amazing, an assortment of hors d'oeuvres that was like over the top. I think I had a taste of everyone. And I think that there were like 21 hors d'oeuvres passed with the champagne. And then they had these tangines, so you could go choose whichever one's the fish, the vegetable, da da da. And then out came a 22-piece dance orchestra. We went until 3 o'clock in the morning.
I know. I believe you. Absolutely. That's how life is in France. The actual life starts.
But they,
Nightlife starts at 10 p.m.
Yes.
while we are sleeping in America at 10 p.m.
I know.
It's closed. But the nightlife starts at 10 p.m.
Well,
and
for a
until
lot of young people. For a lot of young people now, they don't go out till 10 or 11, right? No?
That's
Or
right.
not?
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway. So that was memorable.
Absolutely. I can totally feel that. So we went over this. If your kitchen could talk, it would say,
If I were,
if your kitchen could talk, it would say,
oh, you should have been here yesterday.
I love it. Why? Why?
Because maybe I did something that was ridiculous or made a huge error or something, or maybe yesterday was even better food. I don't know, but it would just be something. You're only as good as your next meal. So
The best cooking advice
yeah.
you ever received was?
Oh, the best. Okay, the best cooking advice. Let's see. I think the best. I'm trying to think if I received it or if I give the best cooking advice is to don't ever serve anything that you haven't tasted.
That's a very good, yes.
And
Tell
now
me more about that.
and when you're cooking, when I have students, I used to have this, teach students. I still do, but now I'm just very limited. if you, many people just follow a recipe, someone else's recipe, they didn't make it up, and then they just follow religiously. If it says a half a teaspoon of salt, they put a half a teaspoon of salt. Well, the food that you have and the vegetables that you have or the chicken that you have may be not the same as the other person's when they made the recipe. So recipes, I write recipes. I'm very meticulous about writing recipes for my readers because I've written cookbooks and magazine articles, and they want a framework. But the point is, you've got to taste as you go and be stingy with all your salt and pepper and your herbs until you taste it and then decide if you should add more. So I always say, taste it. Have you tasted it? And when I'm having students in the participation classes where, I mean, I've done demonstration classes where I do all the cooking, and I basically oftentimes don't measure, but I taste as I go along. I have a big jar of tasting spoons right by my stove, and I just pick one up and taste it, and then put it in the sink and it gets washed by someone else, hopefully, or else a bazillion spoons. And then I taste as I go to see whether we should add it or not. But it's the biggest mistake is like some people just go ahead and put it all together. I said, "Did you taste this before? Have you tasted this yet?" And they say no. I said, "Well, then how do I know? How do you know if it's going to taste good? You don't want to wait until you serve it on the table to know that you left something out or that you overdid this, so that we can repair it, so we can fix it." Yeah. And I don't know if someone told me to do that. I don't think so. I think I did that intuitively.
That was the second thing I wanted to ask. It's rather intuitive for you, cooking, rather than following certain rules and the measurements and all that.
Well, but if you're baking, if you're baking, you need to follow the rules because a baker has figured out the proportions of the baking soda, the butter, the sugar, the flour, anything that's going into baking. There has to be an exact measurement or it will not come out right. We've all, I'm sure you have, or maybe you haven't. If you've ever baked and you take somebody's recipe, you hope that they've been very careful about their measurements because, I mean, if you bake a lot, you can kind of figure out, well, that's more milk than you would ever put in that for the amount of flour. But you want the balance. For instance, a pound cake. Okay, a pound cake is usually a pound of butter, pound of sugar, pound of flour. That sort of proportions. But if you want it to rise and have the right consistency and so forth, you need to measure precisely. You need to be precise in your baking. You can fool around with a few more chocolate chips with cookies or something like that, or the flavoring. So, but especially in cakes, that kind of thing. But cooking, sauces, you start with good ingredients and you taste as you go. And then my favorite thing to make is a sauce. Maybe that answers your next question. If I were in a restaurant and I had one job, I would either be the guy that does all the garnish or I would be making all the sauces.
Really? Why is that?
Because that's the most fun. It's most creative. I mean, I would take the sauces, for instance, but I guess I'd have to be on the line too, though, because I start out, for instance, when I'm making fish, sauteed fish. Whatever the flavor of the fish is, I leave that, and whatever I've baked it in or cooked it in or poached it in, whatever it is, I use that as the base, and then I create a sauce with that base. So it has the flavor of what I've made. So, for instance, if you have filet of sole or filet of flounder you get at the farmer's market, you lightly dust it with, I use Wonder flour, that's all what the restaurants do because it has a grainy quality. I don't use Wonder flour for anything else. They say it's instant flour. Well, it's made very fine so it doesn't pack and get soggy. So it kind of sticks to just the moisture of the meat. And I put salt and pepper and my flour on the flour and the Wonder flour and just a little bit, just a light dusting, just to give it a crust. The secret ingredient in there is smoked paprika.
Uh-huh.
Dash. That's something that I've figured out for a long time, especially if I'm going to make a sauce that has tomato. But since I'm called myself a seasonal chef, so here's what I would do. Okay, we got the flour, we've got the filet of sole, lightly dust it, and then you could either use whatever your favorite oil is. It could be canola oil, it could be a really wonderful thing is coconut oil. Has a wonderful nutty taste to it. Or you could use olive oil, but not the extra virgin, the regular olive oil, because extra virgin will go it'll start smoking at a higher range, high heat. It'll ruin it. You might save the really good extra virgin olive oil for flavor and finishing it, or maybe a drop of that in with other oil, just a drop. I'm going to saute it quickly. I'm going to take my fillets out. I'll pour off the excess oil, if there is any excess oil. Then I'll put finely chopped shallots in the skillet. Then I'll put finely chopped tomatoes, fresh tomatoes right now. Put a pinch of salt, a pinch of pepper, and then I will put it in the skillet. And then I will take vermouth. That's another secret ingredient. Don't cook with white wine in a sauce. Vermouth, because it has a depth of flavor from all the herbs that are put in the vermouth. You put it in the skillet, you catch the flame it, let burn all the alcohol burn off. If you want to make a large amount of sauce, I'm talking about a teaspoon of sauce per serving. Okay, just a little bit. If you want more, then you'll have to put some stock in there or something like that, or even water if you don't want to ruin this thing. And then you just take maybe half a teaspoon of butter, and you'll just swirl it in at the last minute. It gives that incredible flavor you'll get from all the finest restaurants. Just a little bit, not even a teaspoon, half a teaspoon. Swirl it in and serve it.
Oh,
On top of the fish. It's fabulous.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that on here.
You could do it with the chicken breast. I do that with chicken breast, flat, pounded chicken breast. I do it with veal scallops. But I change the flavors. I would make shiitake mushrooms on the chicken breast. I do regular white mushrooms on the veal, whatever I would do, but I would switch it up. And then every time I go to the market, I'll get some herbs. Sometimes I'll snip in some fresh mint. It'll just pop it. Or maybe I'll squeeze some lemon juice. Add some capers. Add some fresh chopped parsley.
Sounds very yummy. So I know that you have been a private chef on luxury yachts. How was your experience on the ocean?
I love it.
How do you describe creating a menu, having to create a menu fresh out of
the freezer? It has to be. What you have to do is, first of all, you have to purvey the food. So that means you have to go to the market and plan up all your menus.
Before you
even get on the boat.
Right.
So you've got that stocked up. Now, I was on a sailboat, and it had freezers and it had refrigerators. I will never do it again.
You won't?
Not for that. I've done cooking on other yachts, but it's been on a yacht and not on a sailboat. But I'm just going to say, what it was very difficult, only because I had to purvey everything. The only thing that I bought fresh before we started the trip, I think it was 8 days. I think it was 8 or 9 days. I'm not exact. It's been a long time. It's in 2000. So there's 24 years ago. So it's a little hard to remember everything about it. But I had big freezers that I shipped from New York to wherever the boat started. Where did I meet the boat up? It's some odd island. And there I went to the fresh market there in Granada. Yeah. And that's where it was. And then I just went through the market and bought whatever I thought else I needed. And then you had to be really ingenious. You really had to figure it out, because you only had X. And if the guests wanted something else, you had to tell them no. or you had to figure out what you could do to, to change it. And one disaster. Would you like to hear a disaster? I've had.
Yes, please.
The
Yes.
disaster is that I was in the market and I had thought about doing something with crepes. Right, I chose something that the merchant told me that I could put it in the freezer and they were like a crepe, but it must have been gotten lost in translation.
Okay.
And so I pulled it out, and it was like this heavy, thick cornmeal thing. I didn't know what I was going to do, because at this point I didn't have the time nor the bandwidth, because everything was going on. It was so hot and so humid, but my kitchen, they had an AC in it, which was interesting. And I made this dessert with this thick, ugly cornmeal leather type pastry. Everything else was delicious, but that was terrible. It was a disaster. It was a total disaster. And I just said, well, nobody's perfect. I mean, what was I going to do? I had this great chocolate sauce. I had the wonderful cream, all this stuff done, but it was the worst. I'll never forget that.
So what did you learn from that experience, though, for the rest of your journey into culinary arts?
What did I learn from it? Just not to do it again.
Not.
I don't need to do that again. It was one of those things that an opportunity came up, and I thought it was really a cool idea. It was over Christmas, and it was, at the time in my life, it was a good thing to get away from everything. And it was 24 years ago, right? And it was a big, it was sort of like a master change to see. Well, I thought, why not? A friend of mine was supposed to be the chef on the boat, and she couldn't make it. It was a challenge, and everything went really well, other than that stupid crepe thing. And there was those things. And I did learn another thing from that a fisherman came along in the water, and in warm water, lobsters are totally different and tough than lobsters we get from Massachusetts, and cold water lobsters. So a good tip for you or anybody is, when you're cooking shrimp or clams or mussels, it usually comes from salt water, right? So make sure make sure that water is salty. You don't have to be not like a half a cup in a that's too much. But let's just say a lot more salt than you think. So it's very salty, and it makes your shrimp taste sweeter, keeps the meat tender, and we'd gotten these lobsters from a fisherman that came by our sailboat and sold them to us right then and there. So in my intuition, I'd never cleaned a lobster before then. I mean, I think I had, but I bought the lobster at the fish market, right? So they'd done the big part, but I just kind of just did it. Was fine. And then I thought, oh man, I don't know what this is going to taste like. I have no idea what it's going to taste like. I figured I better put a lot of salt in the water. It turns out my intuition was good. So that was the thing. But I learned that there. I thought, ooh, I better really give this water a lot of salt.
Interesting to know.
Right.
Interesting. So you have written 8 books.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind your first book? How did you even decide, I'm going to write a book, and what inspired that?
Well, the first big book that I did, my very first book was called Lunches to Go. And it was this little small book that a publisher who had heard about me, a publisher called Barron's was the publisher, and they'd heard about me. I don't know, I guess I was on Long Island, and I guess they heard of me on the radio or something. And I was writing the newspaper column. And they asked me to do a book, a small book. They sent me a contract, and I said, oh, of course, I'd love to do that. And I just signed the contract, not even thinking anything, whatever. And I think they paid me something like a grand sum of $1,000 for all of the recipes, and that was it, nothing more.
Okay.
I signed away all my rights or anything else, but I didn't know any better, but I wanted to be published.